Hey, so in this section, we want to talk about an inverse function. Have you heard the word inverse before? Okay, so you might have heard it. So we say if we have x plus 3, okay, the inverse operation of plus 3 is minus 3. So what inverse operation is, 2x, if you do the operation, if you do the inverse, you're undoing what you did to x in the first place. Inverse function is very, very similar to this. Okay, so if you have a function, okay, a simple function of, let's say, x plus 2, the inverse function, okay, so this function we're taking an x value, we're increasing by 2, and we're mapping it to y. So if this was 2, it'll get mapped to 4. If it was 4, it'll get mapped to 6, and so on. Inverse function is simply, you want a rule, okay, another function which maps it backwards. So maps 4 to 2, 6 to 4. How would you do that? Right? And we use this notation here, this minus. This is confusing because you might think this is like a negative exponent, but on a function, so if this is a function, not a variable, we mean inverse. And clearly, we're just subtracting by 2. So subtraction of 2 is the inverse function of plus 2. Okay, so very similar to the inverse operation. Okay, so let's do a slightly more complicated one. If you have an f at x is equal to 2x plus 5, what's the inverse function? There's two things happening here. You're multiplying by 2, then you're adding 5. So first of all, you're multiplying by 2. Second of all, you're adding by 5. So you have to undo this. How do you undo this? It's very similar to like putting on like clothes. Okay, let's say we're talking about your feet and you're trying to put on your shoes. So you have to put on your sock first and then you have to put your shoe on. If you want to take it all off, what do you have to take off first? Sock or shoes? Clearly, the shoes, the last thing that you put on, you have to take it off first. So we actually have to, right, undo this first. So to our input on the inverse function, we have to do the opposite of that. And to the result of this, we have to do the inverse operation of times by 2, which is divide by 2. Okay? So let's see if this works. On the function, if you plug in, let's say, 3, you get 2 times 3 plus 5. That's 11. And if you put 11 in here, let's see what happens. F inverse at 11, it should give you back 3 if this is a correct inverse function, okay? 11 minus 5 over 3, 6 over 3, 2, I did a copy and paste error there, so it does give you 3, okay? So that's inverse functions. So I hope you understand what inverse function is. All it is that we've been using f to get x values mapped to a y value. Sometimes we just want to know, how do you undo what just happened? And that's the inverse function. Okay, so we need to still explore a little bit more. What does that mean graphically? Okay, what do you do with, how do you define the inverse in more advanced cases? And do inverse function always exist? Or does it sometimes not exist? Okay. So that's what we're going to explore in the upcoming videos. Okay, I'll see you in the next one.